At our Alianza Center, we serve the Puerto Rican and Hispanic community primarily through civic engagement. And we touch on a whole host of topics and a whole host of problems and solutions and opportunities for Puerto Ricans and Hispanics across the whole breadth of I-4. Someone referred to it as our little Alianza universe because we do touch on a lot of things. However, what unifies our message is our commitment to civic engagement, empowering Puerto Ricans and Hispanics, and empowering our communities by raising up leaders through our three pillars of education, service, and leadership. Let's get the ground rules on because I do love definitions and I do love starting off with a definition. The first definition we have is extreme heat. This is NOAA's definition of extreme heat. What's particular about it is extreme heat is defined as summertime temperatures that are much hotter or humid than average. Because some places are hotter than others, this depends on what's considered average for a particular location at that time of year. What I love about this definition is it isn't absolute. It allows us to talk about extreme heat according to the context, space, and place that we're serving in, or the folks that we're engaging in. Next definition. Well, the next one is, I don't like to lead with fear, but I do like to introduce the tension in the room. And the tension in the room is, this is a heat map of Florida today. Now, if we go to the next slide. Next slide, my friend. Things are only going to get hotter. So now understanding that extreme heat is relative to a location and understanding that the temperature is rising, we now see that extreme heat, at least in Alianza's concern, is the entire breadth of the I-4 corridor and almost all of the state of Florida and not every place in America. Next slide. So before I go on, te cuento un cuento. I have a story to share with you that taught me significantly what civic engagement means. Last year, we were invited to an environmental conference, not the Volo one, so I'm not talking about the Volo one, but it was one similar to the Volo conference. And a partner called me and said, Father, can you bring with you Latino leaders? And I said yes. And me and my colleagues came about and we recruited a group, not to lie, about 30 Latina leaders to come with us and engage in the conference. The next day, we gathered in one of our conference rooms to unpack the conference, to have a focus group, and we asked them, how was it? And I was not expecting the tsunami of negativity that I got. And I'm not going to say everything because I'm not here to demotivate you, but I'm here to talk about how they were not civically engaged or included in that space. The first thing they said, Father, we're educated. We know these topics. These topics are important to us, but we were being spoken to. We were being spoken at. We weren't being included in the conversation. Father, we were invited and we became the majority in the room, but they were speaking to the minority in the room. Father, this was not a good investment of our time. And we delved in a little bit deeper. But why? This matters. And one of them said, y'all were talking about solar panels and technologies that are not reachable to us. We're renters. None of us own our own home. And then I poked a little bit more and I regretted it. And I said, well, can't we engage in the neighborhood and maybe talk to your landlords about going solar to reduce your bills? Every time they improve anything in our homes, they raise the rent. Do you really think we would be able to afford to live in our homes if solar got put on the roofs? We would pay more in rent increase than we would save in energy bills. It went on for hours. And we ended up doing something productive, a Bill of Rights. They brought in actionable solutions that addressed extreme heat, climate change, clean energy from their perspective as Latinas, workers in the marketplace, and renters who do not have sovereignty over the land they live on. Next slide. So what they had brought me to realize is when we speak of environment, we speak of these concepts that matter. They do matter. It is important that heat is causing the ice caps to melt, icebergs to splinter, animals to lose habitat, wildfires, flooding, sea level rise, and heat. But we speak about it in a way that is not approachable to the people who are actually living this. So what happens is they say, Father, you're talking to us about other people's problems, not our lived experience in this context. So, what does it mean to connect people to the beautiful Orlando skyline? Civic engagement. Talking to people, knocking on doors, getting to know them, raising up leaders that look like the folk we're speaking to. Raising up leaders who speak the language of the people we're speaking to. Acknowledging that the people we engage, specifically in Central Florida, are educated. We have this image, we present this image of Latinos and Latinas as these folks that we need to educate. They're educated. They can educate us. In that room of 30 Latinas that I brought to that conference were majority medical doctors, women of science, women who dedicated decades to learning. And we put them in a room as a target that we want to reach out to, and we speak to them instead of flipping the table and having them speak to us. Next slide, please. So, we need a definition here. Civic engagement is individual and collective actions designed to identify and address issues of public concern. And in order to address issues of public concern, we have to know what are the concerns of the public we serve. So let's talk about extreme heat. Let's contextualize this a little bit. Extreme heat, let's go back to that little chart here. But it does affect rural areas. It does affect suburban areas. It does affect rural farmland. But if you look at heat maps, cities, urban, residential, and commercial are most impacted by extreme heat. Everyone matters, but we often speak about extreme heat at its extremes, but we don't speak about extreme heat where it's actually really impacting people. Next one. So we need to take everything we speak about and make it from a global problem to a local problem so we can get to local solutions. Farm workers, they matter. Extreme heat makes back-breaking work painful. Children, extreme heat makes it so practices get canceled and they can't engage in sports and they're stuck at home at electronics. We talk so much about public transportation and we're investing in public transportation, but how can we have public transportation if waiting for the public transportation can give you heat stroke? Our theme parks, our workers, they're on their feet 8 hours a day, sometimes longer. Families, they have energy bills they have to pay. Heat equals air conditioning, equals a huge portion of your income. Our elderly, we want our elderly to be active. We want our abuelas, our abuelitas to be outside in their backyard tending their gardens, plantando ahí los gandules and harvesting the fruits of their own labor. But how can they if being outside for more than 15 minutes is going to cause them to pass out? And we have to start working about local economy. Because if our workers can't stand the heat, our visitors can't stand the heat either. And we have to look at the impacts that this has on the consumer. Because if you start Googling Orlando theme park, you're going to find more and more articles about people complaining about the Florida muggy heat. Eventually, it's going to impact our workers, and it's going to take away the economic engine that gives them jobs. Our children. My son's asthmatic. He can't be out in the heat. It messes up with his asthma. And then for those of us who love nature, because I think everyone here loves nature, have you tried taking a hike in the summer in Central Florida? This is contextualizing the problem. This is talking to people. And I don't pretend to have the solutions, because there's an educator back there whom I love. I love you, Elizabeth. She has been a teacher to both my children. And I wasn't even aware of something that meant a lot to her. She pulled me aside on the way in, and she said, elementary schools don't have gyms. It impacts her as a PE teacher, but it impacts our children who are out there in the heat and sometimes get their free time canceled because it's too hot. So when we go out there and talk about extreme heat with our communities, let's talk about solutions. Let's honor our labor force and honor our families by saying, you know what, we're going to connect this conversation on extreme heat to engagement, talking to local school boards, talking to the Florida Department of Education, and let's get some funding down to build gyms at elementary schools. I didn't even know that was a need or a problem, but we find out about it through a conversation with a Latina leader whom I love and respect. Gracias, Lisbeth, for bringing that to our attention. Next slide. Now, there are the things we've all discussed. Increased hospitalizations, increased emergency room visits, heat-related illness, cardiovascular disease, mental health and behavioral disorders, respiratory disease. There's a report from the Florida Department of Health, 2015, that substantiates all of this. You all know we got a problem if the Florida Department of Health says there is a problem with extreme heat. There is very clear evidence published by the state of Florida that this is a problem. But still, sometimes this isn't enough to contextualize it. But to our hardworking families, where every penny matters, increased hospitalizations, money out of your pocket. Increased emergency room visits, money out of your pocket. Increased medical interventions, you can't work, money out of your pocket. And the all famous increased energy bills because you need energy to run AC to keep your family cool in the summer. We have to start speaking about extreme heats in ways that it connects our community to solutions, and it makes our community feel like we're listening, we care for them, and we're here working for them, not just checking a box at a grant requirement to talk about something. Higher energy bills are the most common extra expense caused by extreme weather. 32% of people say they have higher energy bills because of extreme weather. This is where we start making intersections. Clean energy, extreme heat. Inflation, extreme heat. We start connecting the dots, and we start living into the complexity of people's layered lives. And that brings us to the important task ahead of us, resilience. Why do we learn about all this? Why do we speak to our communities? Why do we listen to our communities? Why do we engage our communities? To get about the task of building resilient communities. Resilience is the ability to prepare. We know about that. Disaster preparedness. To plan. Disaster preparedness. Absorb, recover from, and more successfully adapt. More successfully adapt. More successfully live. More successfully engage. More successfully work. More successfully learn. Fill in the dots. More successfully living the best life possible. And that is our goal in this. It's not only to reduce the impacts of extreme heat, not only to mitigate what is causing extreme heat, but do it all for not only protecting our ecology and our planet, but protecting our families and giving people a better lived experience in their context. Next one. And when we do this, we do something called a SMART goal. You all heard of it if you've written a grant. I don't want to go into it too much, but others say is goals that we create for our communities should be at all times achievable and relevant. And you only get about that when you're civically engaged and you contract the right people to civically engaged. It's not just Alianza. There's a lot of culturally competent groups there that live in the communities they serve, that are products of the community they serve, and are fully invested in the communities they serve, coming about with relevant solutions that are actually achievable because we know the talent and the abilities and capacity of the communities we serve. We understand that our Black and brown communities already have the inherent capacity and ability to resolve their own problems, and they don't need us speaking at them. They need us engaging them in relevant conversations where we learn from them and we enable them to execute the solutions they know they need for their communities, family, and for our greater community. And that's what Alianza Center is all about.